Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the Richmond Planning Commission meeting for April 2nd, 2025. Looks like we have a quorum of our members, Ian, Brighton, Chris, and myself. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a long agenda. So anyway, welcome everyone. Aaron, thank you for your work there. All right, so the second item on our agenda is to review and adjust the agenda. Anybody want to comment on that or make any changes?
I know you do.
Yes. Not hearing any other comments, I would like to.
I have a question. I guess we not really new agenda item, but do we? I was looking through the select board's agendas, and do we know whether they have scheduled a public meeting yet on the Jolena Court documents that we forwarded them?
That'll be coming up on Monday of next week.
Yep.
It's on their agenda for next week. So
for the 7th?
Schedule.
To set the date on the 7th.
Oh, okay. So it's not on the agenda for the 7th, is to set the date is going to happen on the 7th.
That's correct. And it should be in late May, I would think, Chris.
That makes sense. Okay.
What is on their agenda is their public hearing on the flood hazard overlay district amendments.
Right.
So they're having a hearing on that, and they're setting the date for the other one.
Yep.
And so Keith and I will go to that meeting just in case there are any questions that people want to ask about that material. Anyone else is welcome to go, obviously. But. Okay, so I would like to add one item, which is to approve the rules of procedure that we talked about at our last meeting. There were very few changes, just a few things about, adding modern media and the gender neutral pronouns. So I would like to add that as number 7, just before we talk about prioritizing our other work for this year. So I'm going to put that in. It is in the packet. Like I said, not many changes, and we talked about them all, so hopefully that would be pretty quick. Okay, we don't have any public here with us today, so we assume there are no public comments on non-agenda items.
I guess I should have done my spiel in case we get bombed. I will be suspending everybody and just log back in, and we'll pick it up where we left off. So.
Okay, great. Okay, so moving on to item number 4, review the minutes of our March 19th meeting, our last meeting. Does anyone have any comments, any additions they want to make to that? Any corrections, additions? Okay, not hearing any or seeing any hands. We will accept those minutes into the record as written. Okay, so moving on to our substantive agenda, the Town Plan Steering Committee, which was the Planning Commission thought was a good idea. We have some formation documents, and we have 7 people who are interested in being on that committee. So what we're hoping to do is to have folks make comments on those documents if they have any, to make a motion to form the committee. It is a subcommittee of the Planning Commission, and to appoint the members to it, and then we'll go over what the next steps will be. But we thought we should get started on that so that there's plenty of time for them to get going.
Do you want me to pull up any of the docs?
So, sure. Why don't you pull up? So we have 2 documents that we created. One is the formation of the steering committee. So these are basically what the mission of the committee is, the membership of the committee, the scheduling. I'm hoping people have looked at this. We did use a template partially that we found in our records from 2015, from the original, the 2018 plan, steering committee effort, the first one that Jess Draper put together. We altered a number of things in it, and this is basically what we came up with. So 5 to 9 members. We currently have 7 people who have agreed to be on this committee, and I think we should leave it open maybe for a couple more weeks in case a couple more people from the public would like to join the committee. But it's a good number right now, 7, 3 public members. We've got 3 planning commissioners and a select board member. And then we have the staff. You know, Keith is going to be staffing this committee, and will be very handy to have around. So we also put on here the formation of a list called the Friends of the Steering Committee. And I put this out there in case there were people out there who are kind of interested in this work but didn't want to really commit to being on the steering committee, which is a good amount of work. So we have had people who have responded. We're keeping them on a list. For instance, some natural resources people have said they would be willing to be friends of the steering committee, the people that we know we can ask for if we need help in a particular area. Joy Reap has said she'd do it for economic development. So if you are talking to anyone and they express an interest in this kind of work, then maybe they'd like to be on the friends list. And there's no requirements for that. It's just a list that we keep, and we reach out to these people when we need to. So it's advisory to the Planning Commission, and there's a list as you scroll down onto page 2 about what these folks are going to be doing. They're going to be coming to the meetings. They're going to be collaborating with the staff on outreach and engagement, participating in the events, reviewing drafts, looking at public input, and generally working up a new plan. Some activities that the town staff and any consultants that we might feel we need, down in section 3, that's their duties. And then schedule will be formulated by the committee members, and we hope some of them meetings will be in person, some of them might be remote. They're all going to be public meetings, so they'll be warned, they'll be recorded. Going on to structure and procedures, just some basic ground rules. We put in this number 5 under structure and procedures. We got that off Jess Draper's list, and we put it in there in case it seemed like something we might want to do. I don't know that we'll appoint these particular items, a transparency monitor, a communication reviewer. We'll have to see how the committee feels about that. I mean, these may be jobs that just everyone on the steering committee does anyway. So, but it sounded kind of interesting. So, so are there any questions about that? Oh, decisions. We don't need a quorum. We're saying we don't need a quorum to hold meetings unless the committee decides otherwise. So the committee will have to decide that. Do we want to make decisions by quorum? We're striving for consensus. You know, this is just an advisory committee. We're looking at materials. We're going to present it first to the Planning Commission, and ultimately it'll go to the select board. So we're going to work towards consensus. The committee can decide if they want to require a quorum. Major decisions, we work towards consensus. And then we put in this levels of consensus, because that seemed kind of interesting from the previous draft, the template. I think that it's not binding in any way, but it seemed like it might be an interesting way to think about consensus, what consensus actually is. So Are there any questions? Anything people feel is left out of this document? Erin?
Hey, I just have 2 cents. I see in there that it says MMC TV is going to be recording these meetings.
Yes.
But normally this is the type of meeting that we would get the recording from you and then broadcast afterwards. So that's a little different than us recording it. But I don't know, maybe you have a separate plan made with Angeliki?
No, I don't think so, but I think it would be under the same protocols that we do now for the planning commission, where I'd hit the record button, and I'm not sure, what we have with Angeliki, to be honest with you, but we certainly could discuss that.
Yeah, okay. I feel like it's more likely that you guys will be recording it. And like this meeting right now is live, so that's kind of what's different. I'm not sure that
Okay.
I don't know what your expectation is, but just that just caught my eye.
Okay.
Okay, so we should, where is that in this document? I mean, we should make it clear that we'll be talking to you about, like, so when Keith hits the record button, Erin, does it,
Yeah,
does that count as him recording it or as you recording it?
that's you recording it when you're making the Zoom video, and then Keith provides the link to that recording, and then we edit it and we broadcast it.
Right.
But this is also live right now.
Mhm. Right, on a YouTube.
Yeah, we're live on channel 1086 on cable, and we're live on YouTube as well right now. But like other meetings, like the affordable housing and all that other stuff, they usually just meet like this, record the meeting, we get the meeting afterwards, and edit it and produce it, and we'll show it and make it available. But it's really you guys recording.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
I don't know if that's necessary, Virginia, but I mean, we certainly can discuss it.
yeah, I mean, how about we just have these meetings will be recorded, period.
Yeah.
If we put that, it leaves it open as to what is happening, but we can always record it, and then it would only be available in an archived unless we've come to some arrangement with you all. But we haven't talked about it with you yet, so we should do that.
Yeah, we certainly can update this document to remove that, or however we land on it.
Can we just put these meetings will be recorded, period, in
Yeah.
this document?
I think so.
Okay, great, thanks. Good point there. Anybody else want to say anything about this? Does this look like what you all expected to be a document for such a committee? Okay, so I'm not hearing any negative comments about that. Let's just look at the other document that we put together, which was a little more informal and was kind of it was kind of just some instructions to what the public candidates and the rest of the people on the committee would actually be doing, so that they would have some idea of, where to start. And by the way, the only requirements for being appointed as a public member to this steering committee is that you live in Richmond and that you have an interest and you're willing to do the work. And we got 3 candidates who seemed to meet those requirements, so those are the candidates that we're appointing. So we can get going.
Virginia, just out of curiosity, do these documents draw from, or did you start from similar documents from the last time around, or are these drawn up new?
Yeah, the formation document, the one we just looked at, we started with the template from Jess Draper's files from 2015.
Okay.
So that was the initial steering committee for the 2018 plan.
Good.
So, yeah, so we used that and kind of updated it.
Thanks.
This document we put down things that we're kind of expecting people to do. And we can add anything or not to this list. But so basically, you need to look at the old town plan. So we're expecting the members of this committee to review it, to notice what its structure is and what the content is, because this is going to be the basis for the new town plan. And it's, you know, got most of the things we need in it. We just need to refine it and alter some focuses and so on. So the basic task is going to be looking at the 2018 plan. The second thing that we are expecting the committee members to do is to attend the meetings, tentatively 2 hours, maybe twice a month, but the committee is going to decide on its own schedule. And then these are the tasks that they're going to be doing. Formulate a plan for gathering input. How are we going to do that? Set dates for strategic events. Review the new statutes that need to be incorporated into the plan. Develop some kind of understanding of what the needs are in the town. Summarize and present to the group and the staff the inputs from the outreach activities and review draft documents. So all of these things, the committee itself is going to be developing its systems on how it's going to do these things. It's going to either assign people to do different parts of the work, or, you know, however the committee decides they want to structure these activities. So that's the meetings, and then outside of the meetings, we will be expecting the members to participate in some of the activities. If we have a charrette, we will need people from the steering committee to participate. Everyone won't have to participate, obviously, in all the activities, but we expect there will be some outside work, and researching may be required, helping to develop written text may be required, so sending out emails to gain specific kinds of information. So anyway, so this is just kind of a list of the type of activities that we imagined committee members would do. And we are hoping that it will all be finished by March. Could go to November if necessary, but we're looking towards March. Okay, so any additions to that list or anything you want to say about it?
Well, pretty straightforward.
That looks good to me. Thank you for making that. It's really helpful.
Good. Yeah, it seemed like we needed some kind of, you know, information. And at the initial meeting of the steering committee, which we will set up after we have voted to form it and voted to appoint these members, that there will be some more ideas there about how we can structure our work. We would like to be efficient and effective and get this done and all approved by March. So I think if we do the work well, then we will be able to do that.
So I do have some canned motions. I don't know if you want me to bring those up or hold.
So we can have a motion, the first motion that you made, Keith, to form this committee. You know, we're going to form it first, and then we're going to appoint members to it when the committee is formed. So if nobody has anything, and we can do that in 2 steps, if no one has anything to say about the formation of the committee and the work that is to be done, no additions to this, then we can go ahead and you can bring up your first motion, Keith, that somebody could make to form this committee, basically as a subcommittee of the Planning Commission. All right. So if there's no further discussion, I'm looking for a planning commissioner to make this motion.
I feel like a little bit of a puppet, but happy to do it. I agree with all this.
You can make your own motion if you wish.
Yeah,
That's fine. This is just
No,
in case you didn't want to make your own motion.
I appreciate Keith doing all the work for me. I think it's great. I'm happy to. So, per the rules and procedures of the Town of Richmond Planning Commission, I move to approve the formation of the Town Plan 2026 Steering Committee, a subcommittee of the Richmond Planning Commission. The purpose of this committee will be to coordinate the development of Richmond's Town Plan 2026 by engaging with the public, the Planning Commission, the Select Board, and Regional Planning, by reviewing and revising the 2018 plan according to public input received, as well as new regional and state requirements. This committee will stand until April of 2026 unless revised, when the work is anticipated to be completed.
Great. That was a comprehensive motion. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Chris. Is there any discussion about it? Is everyone okay with this state of affairs? Okay. All right, so I'm not hearing any negative comments, so we will now vote on this motion to approve the steering committee. All in favor should say aye or raise your hand. I can't see everyone on my screen right now, but
Aye.
okay. And Ian, where is Ian? Is he saying aye?
He's got his hand up.
Okay, very good. All right, so the motion passes 4-0. So the steering committee is approved and will begin its work. Now, we want to appoint the following members who have all agreed to be on the steering committee. First of all, before we do that, I would like to tell you just a little bit about the public members.
It looks like Chelsea is here.
We
if
have
I'm pronouncing her name right.
Yes, we have Chelsea Brooks. Chelsea, would you like to introduce yourself since you're here? Okay, well, we'll hold for a second on Chelsea. Chelsea, you're muted. If you, can we put the motion down for a second, Keith, so we can see who else is here, see who's here? Okay, Mark is
From the
here.
public.
Okay. So Mark, did you vote on the formation just before we get to Chelsea? Did you vote, Mark, on the formation?
I did indeed, yes.
You voted yes, so it's 5-0. Okay, great. Sorry.
No worries.
Okay. All right. So Chelsea, hello.
Hi.
Welcome
Hi,
to the
everybody.
Planning Commission.
Excuse me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for the radio silence. When I'm on my phone, it's like, does not like to unmute. It doesn't like to respond in any way.
Okay.
So yeah, here I am. I don't really know what to say other than hi, and I'm excited to participate and contribute towards the revision and sort of getting this town plan together so that it can be passed in 26. Obviously not working from scratch here, which is wonderful. I have reviewed our town plan several times. And just a little bit about me. I live here in Richmond and I have for 14 years. I love the community and have 4 kids that go to our school system. So I'm pretty invested. I'm here for the long term. So obviously care about sort of the future and in addition to the community and residents at large here right now. Personally, sort of professionally, I work in finance, so with numbers and enjoy a good spreadsheet and things like that, and fact and research and data. And then on the side, I actually am a leader in our local Cub Scout group. So working with others of all ages, from kindergarten through other adult leaders, is I have experience in that. and have participated in running other nonprofits locally. So have a lot of experience with event planning and just engaging people from different walks of life. And hopefully that can bring some help and assistance and a lending hand to the steering committee. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for stepping up. Chelsea, by the way, has submitted some comments on some other portions of our zoning at various times. So it's good. We can tell that you're interested, Chelsea. So thanks. So we'll be in touch soon when we figure out when people can come to the meetings. All right, so that's one of our public candidates. These other two aren't here, so they submitted the following bios. Andrew Powers has lived with his wife Amy in Richmond for 25 years, raising 3 children, with their youngest a sophomore at MMU. They live on Snipe Ireland Road. Andrew says he appreciates the tranquility of the woods despite the threat of annual catastrophic flooding. He owns 2 rental properties in Richmond Village and is someone who enjoys building. He's particularly interested in the housing challenges that we have, finding the right balance between home ownership and rentals while creating opportunities for the next generation to put down roots in Richmond. Drawing from his professional experience, gathering data through interviews and surveys, Andrew is enthusiastic about public engagement and hearing residents' diverse perspectives. He looks forward to collaborating with fellow townspeople to shape a shared vision for Richard's future that works for everyone. So that's Adam Powers. And then our third candidate is Jason Osterman, whose bio says the following. I live in Richmond Town Center with my wife and 2 children. We've lived here since 2017, and our youngest child was born here. We are an international family. I lived in England for 12 years, and my wife and older son were born in the UK. I'm in my mid-40s. My wife and I have backgrounds in technical theater. I'm a business development professional with a lighting company in the architectural and entertainment markets. I enjoy putting some of my demonstration lighting stock to work on Halloween to help give Pleasant Street its well-deserved reputation for being a great place to trick-or-treat. He is an avid skier. He has taken up mountain biking a few years ago, and he says we enjoy getting outside as a family, skiing at the local hills, hiking and camping. So that seems like very promising. Then we have Adam Wood, who the planning commissioners know from his previous stint on the planning commission. He is going to be the select board member on this committee. And then we have Ian and Brighton and me, who will be on the committee from the planning commission. So any comments or questions or?
Looks like a crack committee to me.
Yeah, I think it's a good bunch. And, like I said, if in the next couple of weeks anybody else shows up who hasn't heard about this and is really interested, we have allowed for up to 9 people on this committee. I think more than that is not very efficient. So 7 is a great number, or a couple more public members in the next month, I would say. After that, maybe we won't let other people be on the committee. So if everyone is happy with that, we could have someone make Keith's second motion.
I can do that one. Nobody wants to do it.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
So I just need to appoint these folks.
Yes, you can just make this motion just like it's written up there, or you
Okay.
can use your own words.
I would like to make a motion to appoint the following individuals to serve on the newly formed Richmond Town Plan 2026 Steering Committee. Adam Wood, Chelsea Brooks, Jason Osterman, Andrew Powers, Brighton Moeller, myself, Ian Bender, and Virginia Clark.
Okay, great. Do we have a second?
Second.
Who is that? Chris?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, any further discussion on this motion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of this motion should raise your hand or say aye. You could put the motion down,
Aye.
Keith.
Aye.
Okay, are there any opposed? No. All right, so this motion passes 5-0. Do we still have 5? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, 5-0.
All right.
Great. So we have this new committee. It's great. We have members on it. And Keith is, for the next step, he's going to contact all of the appointed members to figure out when people can meet for an initial in-person meeting. And Keith and I will work on an agenda for that meeting. And then after that, we can have appointments to other people who would like to run this committee if they wish. And I thought that I would also provide to the members a short list of the things the Planning Commission has already, the steps the Planning Commission has already taken. So we're not completely reinventing the wheel. For instance, we have talked about certain things, you know, tabling at the farmer's market and having a charrette and, you know, those kinds of things. So just so that the new members are not coming completely cold into this, we'll put together a list of the things that we've done. I have already reached out to the committees and commissions and groups that are known to own certain of the action items in the 2018 plan, like the Housing Committee. It owns the housing items. Historic Resources, the Historic Society. We've reached out to them with a letter saying, look at the 2018 plan and try to figure out what you like or don't like about it. So,
yeah, and the select board has responded also earlier on too. So I mean, there's some data out there that needs to be compiled for sure.
yeah. And Keith has a filing system going that will be, I'm sure, refined as we go along, but for collating all of this information that we get, you know, we hope to get a lot of public information and through different methods. And we will need a system for keeping track of that information. This is one of the things that we'll talk about at the steering committee, is keeping track of it and deploying it when we need to deploy it in the ways that we need to deploy it. So that's that. And the only other item that's related to the steering committee is number 6 on the agenda, which is we have a list of contacts that we'll put up on the screen in a second for all of the committees. Now, some of them don't have a natural home. For instance, economic development, well, we don't have a business group anymore. We don't have an economic development committee. So we need to figure out who is going to be contacted to try to get information about this. So this was just a list, an initial list, and I would like to know if anyone on the Planning Commission has any other names they can think of that could be in this list. Mark?
Stone Corral.
Stone Corral, okay.
They're a pretty
Under
good employer.
economic development, do you know the people's name?
I do. Melissa and Brett Hamilton.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the Hamiltons are in the process of selling their house in Huntington and will not even be living in the area. They're not Richmond residents to begin with, but they're also not going to be Vermont residents soon.
But they are business owners.
They're business
In
owners,
Richmond.
but I don't know to what extent will be successful.
Yeah, they may not. They may have somebody who wants to represent them. You know,
Maybe. Yeah.
the operations manager, that kind of thing. But they're a pretty good sized business in the town. It seems worthwhile. You know, if what was his name, Gabby, the hatchet owner. was still in
Gabe.
business, Gabe, thank you. I would certainly recommend him too. So
Yep. Well,
I don't
he
know
is
who else
on
to
this
reach out
list.
to. The other place maybe you reach out to is Harrington Meats.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too.
Okay, yep.
What about Milton Cat?
Okay, yep.
I would add that if anybody remembers or has any other comments, just forward them to us. I certainly don't want to spend,
Yep.
all of our brain
I'll
function.
give you one other one. How about the Donahues at the Lucky Spot? Are they on there?
Oh,
That's
yeah,
a good idea. Yeah.
And
Very-
also Donovan's, yeah, the Donovans, and also, Jay Hutchins people. I mean, we have a lot of businesses here, and all of the small
Really?
businesses we won't exactly be able to reach necessarily, but the Reaps, yep. Okay, that's good. That's a good starting point for that. And then, community development seems like there's a lot of angles to community development. So all of these people, we have heard from the select board, they did some work on this, and and Josh for the administration, because a lot of actions are assigned to the administration. So, but all of these people are community builders. So if anyone can think of any other community.
Is Hale and Hardy still a thing?
The what?
Hale and Hardy. I don't know if it's like a senior citizens.
Hale and Hardy, yeah. What did I put them under? I think I
Oh,
put
you
them
might-
education.
Okay,
But,
I'm not looking at the whole document right now. Sorry.
yeah, Hale and Hardy. That some of these things overlap. Like
Senior center.
the senior center is also a community development thing, and also an education thing. So.
Is it our community cares camp on there? I didn't-
No, that would be a good one, I think, to be on there. Susanna Parent, our new town clerk, is the head of that now.
Oh, she is now.
So, yeah. Okay, and community development is another one that doesn't have any one person who owns it. So, economic development doesn't have any one person who owns that. So this is going to be a group effort for that. Education, not really. Emergency resilience also has a lot of people who have input into the emergency resilience. And this is going to be big in this town plan, emergency resilience, because of all the flooding. So, it's going to have to be a focus. Energy.
Can we put RCAC also under emergency resilience? I mean,
Sure.
I think resilience in addition to mitigation for climate stuff is.
Yeah, and, I think the climate change / resilience / flooding issues and housing are going to be the two things that are going to have to be captured from many angles from this plan, because they're kind of top of mind, I think, in this period going forward. We're going to have to think about those things especially. So I'm hoping that all of the different groups are going to incorporate information on those things.
Mark has his hand up.
Mark, yep.
I'm so sorry. That was a residual hand.
Okay, residual hand is fine.
Lower. There we
Okay,
go.
all right. Future land use is going to be a lot of different people, obviously. We're down to that. It's going to be, on the next items on our agenda are going to be talking about future land use because of what we're required to do for the regional plan effort. But any of the big landowners, or like Andrew's Community Forest is going to be in there, as well as natural resources. That will be one that crosses borders. Historic Resources, just the usual folks, but housing, anybody else want to add anything to housing? Peter Brown is the Riverview Commons owner. He's going to be important in that effort. Natural Resources, Transportation, there's no Transportation Committee anymore, but John Cart and Keith Jennings were on it, and Gary Bresser is on it, was sort of on it. I put the schools on it, MMU, USD, because there's always this question about the buses and traffic, and anyway.
Should we get Kathleen on that?
Yeah, we'll put Kathleen. She was on that committee, right?
Correct.
Okay, utilities and facilities. We've heard some from the water and sewer department people. Recreation is another thing that could be on this one. It could be on community development. So that'll be an overlapping letter that'll go out to them. And I put in the packet the kind of letter that I was envisioning going out to these different people. The particular one that Keith put in the packet was a transportation letter. Y'all can look at that and see if that's, this material is all going to the steering committee, but I just wanted to get it in front of you in case the planning commission had any other names or contacts they thought should be on this list.
Just want to make sure we saw Chelsea's comment in the chat.
Okay, I didn't see Chelsea's comment in the chat.
Just that she's believing that the Stone Corral folks, their son is a Vermont resident and the manager.
Okay. All right, great. So we will keep them on the list. Okay, great. And so anybody else you think of, just send it along to Keith and it'll go to the steering committee, basically. Okay. So anything else about that work? Okay, I don't see any hands. So we'll move on to our next item, which is the added item 7, which is approving the rules of procedure for the Planning Commission with a new date on it of now. And if you could put that up, Keith, you can explain just the few changes that were made in the language.
Give me 1 second here.
Yep.
Get my timestamps down. Oh, that wasn't good. Okay, so we discussed this last week, or last 2 weeks ago. And we'll get that out of here. So this is actually, it's a yellow line version, not necessarily a red line version. So as we go through this, it's not a lot to it. But what we discussed, changes have been made. Obviously, we need to insert a date here. The last time this was revised was back in 2013, and we'll revise that and put today's date if it is approved, and if not, we'll most likely get to the next meeting. Regardless of that, please, if you have any questions, just let me know. As we're going through all this, no real changes here. The first change is to add that and or remotely. So that's the technological change, and the authorization that allows for that change has also been cited under rule number 1. Rule number 2, as we discussed, the time for the annual organizational meeting is no later than end of March. So we discussed particularly having a date certain, but we left it a little ambiguous, but no later than the end of March. Everyone recalls. And the following are just the gender neutral pronouns that have changed. These were he and her. They are now them and they in all the locations that they were installed back in 2013. And that's about it. That is what we discussed a few weeks ago. And that's the long and the short of it. If anybody has any questions, please let me know. Any concerns? If you want to study this a little bit more and maybe wait till next week, that's fine. I'd prefer to get this out off my desk right now, but if there are any concerns, please let me know. So I would petition the board right now. Are there any concerns or any questions or comments on this? Silence sounds like satisfaction.
Okay, so if nobody has any objections, we could have a motion to approve the rules of procedure as revised and presented at the meeting of this date.
Yep. I make a motion to approve the rules of procedure as revised, as we just reviewed.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Second.
Seconded by Chris. All right, any more discussion on this? Okay, hearing none, seeing no hands, we will vote on this motion. All in favor of approving the motion as made by Brighton should say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
That's your mark.
looks like a 5-0 approval.
Right.
So we have a new rules of procedure updated on the 2nd of April, 2025. Great. Okay, so we're good. We're running a little bit ahead of schedule. That's great. And we're going to go to number 8, prioritizing the Planning Commission's work for 2025 in addition to the town plan oversight. So that is going to take up some of our time. Obviously, the steering committee is going to be reporting to us periodically. We'll all get together and decide how often that's going to be, and we'll be having to make some decisions at certain points along the way. So there is going to be, even though the steering committee will be doing a bulk of this work, there will be work for the Planning Commission right along. So in addition to that, there are a couple of things that we want to just be thinking about in our minds. One is, do we want to just try to do one other thing, or do we want to run several topics concurrently? That's one question. And the other thing that we will want to think about is that we will want to possibly leave some room for revisions of the flood hazard overlay district, which is being heard on next Monday by the select board if they have things they want changed. And then in May, the Jolena Court amendments will come before the select board, and there may be changes. They may send them back. So we're going to have to leave a little space for those things. So the thing that has the most urgency as a priority is the decisions that the regional plan people want us to make in this spring time frame. The first of it being whether or not we are going to recommend to the select board to have some areas on their new future land use map be designated as Tier 1B. We've talked about this a little bit. The select board is the one that actually is going to be asked by the regional planning people, do you want to opt in to Tier 1B for your downtown, your planning growth planned growth areas, your village areas. Do you want, they're going to ask the select board. The select board is going to need to have a recommendation from us. Do we want to do this or do we not want to do this? So it would be best if we could make a decision about what we recommend to the select board sooner rather than later. The draft is being prepared right now. They would like to have this information, and it's more likely that our wishes are going to be acceded to if we make it now. They will also then be presenting a draft, which will be an opportunity that we might make that decision. And that's coming up at the end of the spring, whenever they feel that is. So it would be good if we had at least talked about it and kind of come to some kind of conclusion about whether or not we want to be opted into Tier 1B. So the people feel like they understand what Tier 1B is, or should we go over that?
Please, let's go over it.
Okay.
Let me pull it up.
Yeah. So in Act 181, it has been allowed for communities to decide that they do not want Act 250 oversight for their essentially downtown areas, for their higher density areas. So communities can, if they meet the criteria, which we do, and the basic criteria that allow you to even make this decision are that you have these areas, a center, we have a village center, we have a planned growth area, we have an active planning process, we have an approved town plan, we have municipal staff, we have wastewater and water in the areas that are under consideration. So on the other sheet, that besides this one, you don't have to get it right on the screen, but anyway, we meet all the criteria, so we can decide if we want Tier 1A or Tier 1B. Tier 1A is really designed for the big communities like Burlington, South Burlington, Essex, Williston. We are not involved, we are not likely to be asked whether we want to be Tier 1A. We're not Tier 1A, a Tier 1A kind of place. However, we are a Tier 1B kind of place.
Mm-hmm.
And what it serves, this allowance for you to opt into Tier 1B, is that developments of less than 50 dwelling units on 10 acres or less will be exempt from Act 250 review. So keeping in mind that we already do this for under 10 dwelling units, that is exempt. This is why we have developments that are 9 units. You know, anywhere in the town, it doesn't have to be in the downtown area for that exemption, the 9 units or less. This expands that to up to 50 units on 10 acres or less. In these particular high density areas, you can opt to not require those developers to get an Act 250 permit. So what is the desired outcome is that it's easier, i.e. cheaper, for developers to make bigger projects. They don't have to go through Act 250 if we're Tier 1B. So in terms of thinking about this, whether we want to do this, whether we want to recommend to the select board, they make the ultimate decision, but they're going to want some information about it, and somebody has thought about it, namely the Planning Commission. They want to know that we've thought about it. And so Ian, go ahead. You had a question or a comment?
Yeah, it's pretty clear here, I guess. This is just for the village or some other designated growth area if one is created at some point?
Yeah, it's for, and we'll look at the map in a minute because that relates to the other things that they want us to do, their future land use map. But it's basically for the village center, which we have a designated area of the village center, and the planned growth areas, which right now are going to be the village neighborhood north, the village neighborhood south, the residential commercial district in the village. When we look at the map, you'll see the nuances there. So
I would add just one more thing, just to add a little more context. Not having the Act 250 review does not absolve the applicant to get state permits that are required, such as wastewater, such as wetland permits, stream crossings, or the like. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that Act 250 reviews are an environmental review. And it's just another layer, a positive one, depending on your point of view. But we're talking about 50 units or fewer at 10 acres or less. Specifically, that approach removes Act 250 and the board from having to go through that review. So I just want to make sure that everybody's aware that state permits are still required. The town does have the Development Review Board, which would review it. So that's the only clarity I wanted to provide.
okay, and I'm going to ask Chelsea if you could, it's really hard for me to read the things in the chat at the same time, so if you could raise your hand and state them, that would be great. That would be much easier for me to deal with. I kind of can't do the chat at the same time. Brighton.
Yeah, I'm wondering, Keith or someone else, if you could talk us through a little bit the additionality provided by the Act 250 review process over kind of the process of getting those other state permits that they still have to get, and over the whatever permitting happens here in Richmond.
Well, as far as Act 250 review, I have not been involved in one of those. My understanding is they have their own procedures and protocols that they go through. And it is usually centered around the environmental aspects of a project once it reaches a certain criteria. So the particulars of the reviews I really can't comment on. I know that they have engineers on staff, which help them with that. They have planners on staff. They have, all the resources of the state on staff, not on staff, but available. But we have all the resources of the state also at our fingertips if need be. And we do have what I consider a pretty robust land use plan that we administer. I don't know if that answers your question, Brighton. It probably doesn't fully, but my take on Act 250, it is another layer of oversight, which is positive. I'm not making it a negative at all, but it is another layer. And that I don't know if that answers your question or not, Brighton.
Well, and one thing that kind of helped me to think about this is to look at the Act 250 criteria. So the way Act 250 works is there are 10 criteria that they evaluate projects on. So, for instance, criteria 1, and I'm just using this as an example. Criteria 1 is called air and water pollution. And here are the subheadings that they look at. Headwaters. Now, you might really think there aren't probably any headwaters in the village, but it would be something to think about. Waste disposal. We have a septic, system, a treatment plant that deals with the waste from these particular areas. So a number of these things wouldn't require much work on our part because they're not really applicable. Water conservation. Well, we're needing to think about stormwater somewhat. Streams, shorelines. Well, there are no shorelines in these areas that we're considering. Wetlands. So all of those things, you know, if you look at the different criteria, many of them don't apply anyway. Some of them require state permits, like the wetlands. So that's one way to look at it. Water supply is another criteria. Erosion and capacity of soil to hold water is another item. Traffic and transportation is something that we would be looking at. We have some regulations about that in our zoning. You know, these are things that Keith, I know, feels that his department is able to make these determinations and get further information. For instance, if we need a traffic study, then we would be able to get engineers to look at it. So looking at the things that they are looking at, forest blocks, habitat connectors. Well, in these downtown areas, there are no forest blocks. You know, those are complicated questions that you might need additional help with, but we're not going to because they don't occur in these particular areas. So I don't know if that helps. That kind of helped me to understand that many of these natural resources questions aren't really applicable in the small areas of Richmond that are going to would be coming under the 1B. So that's just another way of looking at it. Chelsea?
Hi, thanks. Sorry about the chat.
Yeah, that's okay. I know people use the chat. I just can't seem to focus on it.
Yeah, it's okay. Thanks, though, for directing me at how best to communicate. The question I had simply is, should the town request to opt into Tier 1B, and should that be the Planning Commission's recommendation? You say that these developers would still have to get state permitting, stormwater and wetlands and all of that. But currently, when they go under Act 250 review, that's kind of where the accountability piece comes in, right? Because the Act 250 review has this process. And I was curious, if the town opted into Tier 1B, who would hold those developers accountable for obtaining the proper state permits? Would that be the responsibility of the town?
That's a great question. Well, first of all, if it goes under conditions review, or if there's a DRB review, the DRB would be the permitting authority and would require that in their decisions. In lieu of that, and in the case of some of the issues that you've run across justifiably, would be my office. And all I can offer to satisfy your concerns, if in fact there are concerns, would be that as a result of the issues that you've dealt with, there's a lot more oversight of what is going on in the permitting process by myself. So I guess that's the long and the short of it, Chelsea. It would be the DRB and or my office, depending on who's the permitting authority.
And the way it's supposed to work is that before you get a CO, certificate of occupancy, you would need to have your state permits. Right now, it is not exactly required in most of our zoning that you have it before you start the project. Is that correct, Keith?
That is correct.
Yeah, it's not required that you have the permits before you start the project. And that is something that various planning commissions have kicked around over time, is can you or can you not, as a municipality, require the state permits before the project? You can require them after the project, before the CO. In our wetlands section, we do have more of a requirement for needing to get the permit. Yep. So anyway, it's kind of a difficult issue that has been.
It is. There's a siloing that goes on in this state that is difficult if you're an administrator, to say the least. And what makes it easier would be language in the zoning regulations. And to your point, Virginia, is that's a great question. Can we require it? I would think so. And that should be a discussion, obviously, at the steering committee. And then as we move up, we'll have those discussions.
Yeah. And, perpetual discussion on the planning commission. Ian, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm not familiar with some of the history around this, but have we issued COs without those permits being in place?
Not typically, no. I'm sure some have been. It's, we have a lot of issues with people building residential structures, moving in, and then asking for a CO after the fact. That's one of the biggest.
Yeah, I was wondering if like people had leveraged that particular situation against the good natured zoning commissioner or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, from a strictly administrative point of view, I don't like the siloing. I would much rather everybody was in the same silo, for lack of a better term. And specifically from an administration point of view, if we have that language that requires this to happen, even you have to at least enact, let's just use a wetland permit. You have to at least submit proof that you have submitted a wetland permit to the state before the permit gets released. The building permit that we would be in charge of. I mean, that's kind of what I'm looking for.
And, we did have the case with Jolena Court where a conditional CO was granted which stated you can have the CO if you do all of these things, but there was no follow-up to it. And it is not actually a thing, a conditional CO. That was something that a zoning administrator kind of made up and made up. So, you do have these imperfections in the system, even though that isn't supposed to happen. A CO is supposed to be, these things are done. Everything is done. They've been looked at. They're checked off the list. They're fine. It's good to go. Not, well, it's okay if you do these things, you can have the CO.
Yeah, I like to use the term, it's our only cudgel that we have left to close a permit out is the CO.
Yeah. Chelsea, you have another comment? Yes.
Sorry, Ian, to your point, I just, not COs being issued, but just in general about state permitting, because the town doesn't have sort of jurisdiction and sort of specific, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of subject matter expert, right? Like specific expertise. Some of this stuff is pretty nuanced. And so there's also, to some extent, reliance on the applicant to be truthful. So that plays a factor, because they could just say, yeah, I don't need state permits. And without that expertise, one could believe them. So that's why I was kind of curious about this responsibility for the state permits, because without somebody who's really familiar with when they come into play, if it is our responsibility as a town to hold people accountable to get them, that's in my mind like a little bit of liability, or like sort of a weight on our shoulders just to think about.
Yeah, and I think that concern is specific to permits coming out of my office and not from the DRB. So I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, Chelsea.
Keith, sorry, I'm not specifically only speaking about your office or singling you out. Interestingly, just to speak to this so that I am explaining myself better. Excuse me. Interestingly, development that's being done by a member of the DRB. I'm not entirely sure that he needs a permit, and he thinks he does. So that's just an example of the nuance of this. So that's, yeah.
Yep.
And that's kind of the opposite of what I'm concerned about. Like somebody actually thinking they need a permit and they actually don't need one. So like,
right.
Okay,
You'd hope that happen all the
yeah.
time, right?
That would be the better outcome, right? Versus my worry. But it just proves to kind of, it proves my point in that, like, it's so nuanced that, like, obviously somebody who doesn't need a permit wouldn't be doing that on purpose, because it's costly to pursue.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So, I think this is why it's a little difficult to assess, because the benefits accrue in that we might have more housing. And then the negatives are that you have less oversight, which is like comparing apples to oranges. You know, it's not easy to compute the relative values of those things.
Mhm.
So what would people like to do with this? Do you want to try to get more information about it? What are we going to recommend to the select board? Do we want to think about it? But if we think about it, what is going to help us to make the decision is what we need to know. One other thing that I would say is that also in Act 181, there is an interim position, an interim policy until the new land use board is completely formed with all their policies and their guidelines. Until that time, Tier 1B is essentially in place until January 1st, 2027. So in a way, we're going to, I guess, see if it works or not, whether we opt in or not. People are exempted from Act 250 with less than 50 units on less than 10 acres until January 1st, 2027. That is written into Act 181.
And they still have to go through DRB review. I mean, they still have to go through reviews, they still have to get their state permits, so.
Yeah, and they still, have to follow all the municipal, so it's like what we used to just have to do with the less than 10 acres, which is all of the things that Keith just mentioned, only it just goes now up to 50 units on less than 10 acres, or 10 acres or less.
It's 10 acres left, yep.
I'm just looking at the map right now.
Pull that up.
Our village center area, which is the only area that this would apply to, is very small, and I'm not actually sure how much more room for development there is in it.
Not a lot.
So that this might be not a huge deal either way in some respects.
Right. Well, it's the center, the village center, and the planned growth areas, which is the lighter color, purplish.
Are those actually sorry, I was looking at the document we were looking at it a second ago, and it looked like it was just downtown and village center.
No,
Maybe I missed the planned growth areas.
And the planned growth areas.
So we don't have a downtown center.
Right, we don't have a downtown
Mapped,
center.
not mapped, because this is a draft future land use map.
Right. We don't have a downtown. We have a village center, and we have planned growth area.
Right. Currently mapped.
And we have village areas, but we don't have any of those currently mapped village areas currently shown on this map. And what is more, we've already heard from Christy Witter that a lot or a number of these areas don't even really belong in the planned growth area. For instance, the lots that the schools are on, those 3 big lots up there at the top of your map of the Richmond Village, and the 2 cemeteries, Holy Rosary, that one, and the Riverview Cemetery next to it, the town cemetery, and the Richmond Land Trust parcel next to the Willis Farm property owned by the Reeps. All of that land should not be in the planned growth area, because that is not land that is planned for growth.
Yes.
So that is one thing that we need to be telling the regional mapping people about this map, is that it's incorrect. I agree with Christie's assessment that those portions should not be in the planned growth area. They are not planned growth areas. So you're correct, Brighton, in that it's a pretty small area. And just to add another slight wrinkle, the only lot that's really big enough is the Jolena Court lot, the Creamery lot. But Keith and I have been talking about whether or not they are already under an Act 250 plan, that whole property was subject to an Act 250 plan, and under Tier 1B, even the interim Tier 1B, anything that's already under an Act 250 permit would remain the state's jurisdiction, the state's Act 250 jurisdiction. So we're pretty sure that that building 2, which is maybe going to be built, would be under the state's jurisdiction, which is like the only lot that is big enough to have, something less than 50 units. But we're going to check it out for sure and find out for absolute certainty.
It does need to be fleshed out. I did research on that today, and it appears that the language allows for revisions and amendments to existing Act 250 permits without having to go through the board. So any amendments and revisions would be exempt also, but that has to be vetted and, before we make that an absolute. And Virginia, I did send you an email on that a little bit earlier today, but
Okay.
You haven't caught up to it, so that's fine.
All right. Yep. Yeah. So, since that's the only parcel that is likely to be affected,
Right.
and might well be affected soon if the zoning changes go through that we're proposing, it would be good to know that, whether or not that would be our Act 250, whether we would have to look at those things, those criteria essentially, or whether the state would go on looking at them.
So there is and there's some more information I can provide certainly for the next meeting. We're not looking for any recommendation tonight for the select board on this. I don't think we're totally got our arms wrapped around this. Because Virginia and I still have some questions, some outstanding issues that we're just not satisfied with, specifically with the exemption. What qualifies for that? If you are currently under an Act 250 permit, I'm reasonably certain that we're exempt. We're good to go, but I need to have that discussion at some point. But I would also add to the committee, if there's any items that you can think of, you have any questions, forward them and I'll research them in order for us to make an informed recommendation to the select board. We're required to do that. The select board is required if we want to go with that, if we want to go with a Tier 1B. Tier 1A is out. Tier 1B, I think we have the capability of taking care of that, specifically with the lands that we have left over for development. That is the one shovel-ready project is Jolena Court. Now, scenarios could arise where people tear down existing structures, combine lots, and build a 50-unit structure. That would be exempt potentially. But I think that's highly unlikely in the town that's been gentrified to the level that we've been gentrified to.
And the Regional Planning Commission, what they say is that you either do it kind of now-ish or before they have the final draft in July, or the next opportunity is 8 years from now. Now, I don't know if they would hold strictly to that, but that's why it seems like we ought to make a recommendation in the next couple of months anyway. And if you can think of any other kinds of information that you'd like that would help you make this decision, then that would be good too. You could reach out to Keith and you can get that.
And I'll forward, I have it up here on my other screen here. I do have the Act 250 criteria and I'll forward that. We have that in the office posted, but I'll forward that to all the members before the end of the evening.
Yeah, and it's also, the criteria are in their expanded form that describes them in 10 VSA 6086. So you could put that on there, Keith. So if you want to go and get more than just a name for it, you can go and look at the statute.
Some light reading there for sure.
Yeah. little light reading. So, Ian.
Chelsea included Buttermilk's Act 250 project number, if anybody wants it.
Yeah, we have that on file.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, and obviously, you know, you can go to the Act 250 website and put that number in, and all the documents will come up. Also, that's one of the beauties of that website.
Yep, and you know, Buttermilk just got a DRB permit for building 2, so that would be a recent document that should have said something about Act 250. We were going to look that up, but we didn't have time.
I didn't have time for that. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll do that at some point. Same hand, Ian, or is that a new hand?
New, sorry.
New hand.
So, do we have a choice on this?
Yeah, we can either opt in or not opt in. We can either recommend that the select board opts in or doesn't opt in. That's our choice. It's a complete choice.
But it's a recommendation to the select board. We're not the ultimate arbitrator here.
It's a recommendation to the select board, but you know, we ought to have some kind of rationale for our recommendation, because the select board, as we know, doesn't have time to research these things. So we should try to do the best we can to make a recommendation and have a rationale for it.
I have reservations already.
You have a recommendation?
No, reservations.
You have reservations about opting in?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
But we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, I think what we're going to have to do is to put this on the agenda for our next meeting. And hopefully we will have had some more information, find out some things about Jolena Court, and go from there. Yeah. Talk about it again. Okay. So that is one of the things that we need to do for the Regional Planning Commission's efforts. The other one is to look at the map that we were just looking at and decide whether it correctly reflects what we want to do as far as we know. Now, the email from from Christy Witters saying, take the schools out and the land trust land and the cemeteries out of the planned growth area, made me think, okay, well, I didn't really notice that myself, but we should be looking for things like that that are obviously incorrect. The transition zones, we should look at the definition of transition zones and think about so like we have the gateway beyond, you know, from the Willis farm up to the mobile station, and including the remaining unbuilt portion of the Riverview Commons mobile home park. Those are in the transition zone. Is that what we want to be in the transition zone? You know, we need to read that definition and think about what we want to be in, you know, whether we want to be having that called a transition zone based on their definition. Then there are these several kinds of rural areas: rural ag, rural forest. So there's a recreation district. So we should really be looking at this map carefully and picking out any things that we can think of offhand. We know this land better than the Regional Planning Commission.
Yep.
They're just basing it on like distance from the center and, you know.
Topography and
So I'm not sure exactly how we want to go about thinking about this map. I'm open to suggestions about whether we, you know, really blow up pieces of it and look at it and see if that matches what we know about the territory. So all I can say right now is that those things we should tell them, because they are asking us whether this map is what we want it to be. And even though they make the final decision about the map, they're going to listen to what we say. If we say we don't want those cemeteries in the planned growth area, they're not going to put the cemeteries in the planned growth area. So anyway, I'm open to suggestions on how we want to go about doing this, but this is another thing that we need to do, hopefully, before they come up with their draft map.
Their final, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have another opportunity when they present their draft map, but by the time they present a formed draft map, they are, committed to it, kind of, and they would prefer that they didn't have to change it. They will change it if we insist, but the sooner we get this information to them, the better.
Right, and then eventually it's the LURB that will approve these maps, is my understanding.
Yeah, the new land use review board, but all of this is kind of in transition because we're going from the Act 250 board to the new land use board that is supposed to be, I noticed on one document that I was reading that they're going to provide guidelines on certain things. Well, they haven't really made any guidelines yet. So, there's a lot that's kind of in a transitional state with us, with regional planning, and with the new land use review board. So it's all a little chaotic, but we could at least look at the map and see if there are any glaring errors from our point of view. So I'll probably put this on the next agenda and try to figure out some angle on it.
I definitely think this is definitely going to be an agenda item for the next meeting. So I mean, we'll get the info out there. I mean, all the info is pretty much part of this here, but I mean, there's some additional stuff that I certainly can put into the docket, so to speak.
Yeah, and we can try to figure out if there are any landowners or groups that we want to contact about their pieces of land, especially out in the countryside. Which one of those the 4 rural groups they want to be in? Do they meet certain criteria? Anyway. All right, so if no one has anything else they want to say about this mapping question.
This feels like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So these rural groupings, like it's clear that the decision that we make about the planned use area will have some significant teeth if we go for the 1B Act 250 exemption. The difference between these different rural areas in this new map, like what actual teeth does that have? How will it affect the people that own land there?
That's a really good question. I know that there are some road length discussions on that. You'd have to really drill down into Act 181, which is not an easy read at all. But one thing that doesn't apply to those areas is the tiers, or the tier 1s, I should say. Don't really apply to those areas because that's just water and sewer areas.
And this is not a zoning map.
Right.
Exactly. That's why I'm asking.
Their future land use map and our future land use map in our town plan, which are supposed to align, whatever that means, are not zoning maps. So I think in that sense, there's no direct implication for the owners of those properties, but the town plan is used in, to bolster arguments for certain questions that come up or legal situations that come up, or, the town plan, however, is often can be used in both sides of an argument because it's an aspirational document. It's not a legal document. So, if they put something, for instance, the highest priority forest block, which is mapped in the Agency of Natural Resources Biofinder database that has been studied, and it meets the criteria of a highest priority forest block, which by law in Vermont is supposed to be afforded or considered at least for certain protections. So they've mapped that as a forest block area. Now that doesn't say anything about what people who own property there can or can't do, but you know, we as the Planning Commission need to be thinking about how to translate that into zoning. What do we want to put in about zoning? Would we like to say that you can't build in the middle of the forest block, which destroys it as a, you know, highest priority natural area? Do we want to say you have to build around the edge? Do we want to say you have to have clustered housing? Do we want to say you have to have short driveways that don't extend far in? You know, those are the kinds of things that would actually impact the landowners there. So that's the kind of thing we have to think about, and not exactly from the town plan's legal point of view, but the town plan is clearly, I mean, as we're thinking about it, should we call that a natural area that has a forest block protections? So I know that's a little vague, but they just want us to think about it now, but we can't think about all of these things now, you know. I mean, the time they
Exactly.
meaningful outreach consisting of 2 months is probably an oxymoron. Anyway. So if anyone thinks of any other information they would like to have, or another way that we can think about this, or how we could do this as best we can, obviously, that would be
Yeah,
great.
my only like thought process wise would be to chop it up and have different areas kind of owned by people who know those specific areas particularly well, or who live there or something like that. But I don't know who those people are specifically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, there certainly are kind of discrete areas that you could do that with. You know, I mean, it's like thinking about the village and the planned growth areas. They're very small, they're very discrete. Once we get rid of the cemeteries and the schools and so forth, you know, so, and then the outlying areas can be broken up to a certain extent, like the recreation area that's Cochran's, you know, the lot that is the Cochran's property as a recreation, that's one of the rural categories. You know, that would be something that we could talk about as a discrete area. And then there's all the forested area that's north of Route 2 that could be considered as a discrete area, and maybe we could talk to the people who live there. So,
I mean, the future land use map isn't our responsibility, though. Certainly the zoning is.
well, for the town plan, we have a future land use map.
If that's what, yes, but this is for the region. But yes, no,
Right.
I get that.
So, and you know, I mean, the language is very vague too about it being in alignment. What does that mean? They, you know, they say the town and the regional planning will collaborate on this regional future land use map that is based upon all the towns' different future land use maps. That's the language that they use, but it's not exactly, you know, specific as to, does it have to agree exactly? No, I don't think so. It doesn't have to agree exactly, but it has to be similar somehow. Anyway.
Yeah, that leads me to my new Latin term that I learned yesterday.
Oh, yes. Which is?
Which is adjustum generis, adjustum generis, which means of the same kind. So there you go.
It's generis or genera?
Generis.
Generis. Adjustum generis?
Adjustum generis, resulting in of the same kind. So.
All right, good with the Latin.
It's exciting in zoning when we are able to introduce Latin into our zoning regulations. It is for a planner and a zoning administrator.
Gives it a certain gravitas.
It gets me up every day. So.
All right, so just think about this and we'll revisit it next time. I think we're done with it for right now.
We're done.
So that takes care of C, D, and E, which are the things related to regional planning that we need to do. All right, so then other things that we might do are listed in F on this agenda. We could continue to work on the commercial districts, and we have had a question from Richmond Rescue about their lot coverage. Could, like they want more lot coverage. So it might be a good time to think about the commercial districts. If we're thinking about lot coverage, we also have to think about stormwater, what we're going to do, because the default way of handling stormwater was to have big lots with mostly pervious surface, not much impervious surface. If we're going to keep increasing the lot coverage for impervious surfaces, we need to figure out what we're going to say about stormwater. Are we going to say you cannot have any stormwater? Exit your property. And here are the ways you can do it. You can have dry wells. You can have, I don't know, rain gardens.
Yeah, it's infiltration devices. We do have a good clause when it comes to that land coverage in our IC district, I think it was, Virginia, we were looking at today.
Right.
Go up to 80% of impervious as long as you account for all the stormwater. It doesn't say a 25-year storm, a 100-year storm. It just says all the stormwater. So I have no idea what that means. But I think that's a litmus for what we could potentially do to get some stormwater controls in. So
yeah, and I think thinking about stormwater controls in our zoning does tie in with Allison's perennial concerns about flooding. We should keep our concerns in mind because flooding is a big deal. How are we going to have less flooding? So thinking about for different districts, it will be different kinds of things, so like in the densely populated village, we're going to have different controls perhaps than in the outlying countryside where there is a lot of pervious surface. So anyway, so that would be one thing we could think about. Commercial districts, including stormwater. We could also, as a kind of a fill-in activity, do a brief update to the residential commercial districts, which are pretty fine from Act 47 and Act 181's perspective. They do have a few things that they have to be changed to be brought up to date for those new acts. And then we could talk about some technical updates to the RZR. I kind of hesitate to start any major projects until we get the FHOD and the JC out of the way and we understand how much of our effort is going to be required oversight to the steering committee for the town plan. But so that's the short version. Anybody have any comments about that? What do you all want to do? Do you want to try to run several of these small projects at the same time?
We are planting seeds here more than anything,
right?
I would say.
Just trying to get some ideas about how we want to schedule our time going forward for this year, anyway.
This question is mostly in addition to A through E, because we sort of, A through E are sort of, we want to do them now, right?
Kind of.
Time sensitive, yeah.
Yeah. So, do we want to wait until we've done those things, until we start doing something else? That would be one approach. They're the things that have a timeline associated with them, along with the town plan has a timeline, but those items have a timeline. The other things don't really have a timeline.
Yeah, I guess that would be considered regular business.
Right, kind of regular business. Anyway, I don't think we have to decide that right now, but we will have to decide it at some point. And, you know,
Yeah, if for anything, for scheduling purposes, you know,
right.
time is going to be limited.
We may know a little more after Monday's public hearing on the flood hazard overlay district. If that is going to come back to us, then we will need to work on that as well as these other regional items.
Do you want to talk about G a little bit?
G. Yeah, so that's another project, which is, because of its ineffectiveness at meeting people's needs and expectations, we removed the master development plan language from the zoning regulations. So we need to complete that task, which we said we would do, by removing that language from the subdivision regulations and by talking about the critical permit conditions, which we replaced the master development plan with. So I see that as something a little bit larger than some of these other projects, but we did say that we would do that, so.
Yeah, and I would say there are other items within the subdivision regulations that need a little bit of tweaking too, but obviously we just need to focus on that one at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so we are responsible for the subdivision regulations, and so we should look at them every once in a while.
Been a while, it certainly
Yeah,
has.
it has been a while.
That exact date.
All right, so if no one has anything else to add to this discussion, we could wrap up for this evening. Select board work on the 7th. We'll report back to you at the next meeting, and then we'll try to figure out what we're going to do with this 1B thing. If you want to get any other opinions, or, you know, if you think we should talk to other towns, or whatever it is you think would help us to make this decision, you should just send along to Keith, and we'll try to get that information. All right. Anybody else have anything to add? I think we got the steering committee done. We'll get them started. That'll be good.
Fantastic.
And we could have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
But before everybody goes, you have to look at my new puppy.
Yep.
Oh.
And what's the puppy's name?
Cooper.
Cooper.
Oh.
No, Cooper.
He's
Oh my
sleeping.
goodness, he's very small.
It's like a fox.
How old is this puppy?
He's 3.5 months.
Oh,
What kind of dog?
He's a Chihuahua Corgi. It's kind of
Corgi-wa.
Yeah.
Corgi-wa.
Yeah.
Cool.
He's bossing me around.
We have
The
a
last week.
Yeah, great. That's all you need is a dog project. That'll take up also a good amount of time.
It's really helping me, you know, structure my life.
Yep, balance, a little balance.
You're
I
sleeping.
moved to make Cooper the Corgi-wa the
It's
mascot
a
of the planning commission.
He approves.
Okay.
All right,
Second that.
perfect.
All right. Have a good night.
What's his name, by the way?
Cooper.
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 Oh, Cooper. Cooper is his name, right. Did we have a second to adjourn? Brighton, I think, made the second to adjourn
Yeah, that's what that other motion was.
with the other one. Yep. Anybody is opposed to adjourning should speak up. Nope. All right. So thank you all. Very good. We'll see you on the 16th, and have a good couple of puppy weeks.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
night.
Y'all take care.
Thanks.